Yo, what's going on, guys? And today we are doing the Golden State Warriors off-season preview primer. As in the next week or two, we'll probably also release the predictions. So I want to hear your guys' opinions before we talk about their priorities and preview what they should do this offseason. I want to hear, what are your predictions if you were the general manager, aka Mike Dunleavy Jr., of the Warriors? What would you do? So let's get right to it. Shout out to my coworkers at Hoops Hype for this information. And the biggest thing is this Warriors team is trying to keep it together. First off, is Klay Thompson going to stay? I think he's the biggest if and or but. Will he stay? And I think he's the biggest domino that needs to be questioned biggest domino question that needs to be answered before we proceed with the rest of the offseason as, hey, is that going to be something important? They need to address, is there going to be a floor, a ceiling that they won't go past in terms of money? And then they need to have a contingency plan of how are they going to replace his production, which I think you can do. There's enough shooters out there, like a combination. If, like, let's say Luke Kennard declines his option, if you can go get Luke Kennard for like $7 million and then Buddy Hield for $7 million as well, and spend $15 million on those two, maybe that's something that could work. But Klay Thompson is a free agent, so is Darius Saric, Usman Garuba, and Jerome Robinson. Then Gary Payton II has a player option, while Lester Quinones is a restricted free agent. So for me, when I look at this situation, I think they're obviously, they need to figure out the Klay Thompson situation. They have a second round pick only. They went 46 and 36. They're sending their first round pick, if it's 5 through 14, to Portland. They would retain the pick if it moves into the top 4, which is very, very unlikely. And for me, when I look at this current situation, they've spent $677 million in penalties and have been taxed 4 out of the past 6 seasons. Is it worth continuing being in the tax and over the cap for a team that isn't championship able? Now, I think we need to prioritize Jonathan Kuminga, Brandon Podziemski, Trace Jackson Davis, and maybe even Moses Moody, if you believe he's still part of that core moving forward. I think definitely looking at guys like Kevon Looney, if you could flip him for another contract or flip him to open up space and then refill his roster spot with a veteran minimum, I think you can get similar production. It just doesn't seem like Kevon Looney is the same guy that he used to be. As we've said, Kevon Looney, there's $3 million guaranteed currently. It goes up to $8 million if they don't move him before June 24th. So that's something to watch. Then, of course, Chris Paul. They could cut Chris Paul and then re-sign him to a cheaper deal. His contract's unguaranteed, and they are definitely going to either cut him or move him. So I think maybe use him as a salary dump guy that you can maybe spread a couple contracts through. He could be someone that could be used to their advantage. Like, let's say a team that has back contracts that they want to move. What if, to replace Klay Thompson, you send Chris Paul for a combination of not Terry Rozier. How about Duncan Robinson and Nikola Jovic? It's somebody else on that roster that maybe they like, and you send Chris Paul there, so that way Miami is able to create cap space for themselves by waiving Chris Paul, and then the Warriors have gotten themselves potentially a guy like Duncan Robinson or a Terry Rozier to replace the production that Klay Thompson's going to leave, and then maybe get some additional young assets or rotational players that you could join there. I'm not saying that's the deal you need to do, but a framework like that could really be smart. So prioritizing a trade not only with Chris Paul to use that contract before they just are forced to waive it. That way you can have a contingency plan for Klay Thompson, because you're probably going to know beforehand if Klay is going to stay or not. So that's why you're going to start having these moves. And for me, I think that's what we need to keep out. So obviously, I think the goal is to lower the cost of the team and to develop the young guys while still trying to be playoff good. So I think the biggest thing is that Chris Paul is probably going to leave, so they need a backup point guard, like a legit backup point guard, a Tyus Jones, maybe a DeLon Wright. That's why I floated out Terry Rozier, because he can play the 1 and the 2. And then a stretch 4, a guy who can complement Green. So I think when you look out there, obviously, guys like, I don't think PJ Tucker would be useful at this point, but I think the Aaron Nesmiths, the PJ Washington, the Grant Williams, if you can find those guys, those are the players that they need to look. I mean, if you want to call up the Wizards, either Corey Kesper, Denny Abdia, and I know they're not stretch 4s, but they're just stretchers. A stretch 4 would be, obviously Kyle Kuzma would be like the ideal situation for them. I think Kleba, he's a little expensive, but he's technically someone that they probably could get rather cheaply. And as you look at the rest of the roster, I think more two-way wings, the Torrey Craigs of the world, obviously the new era of players like a Nickeil Alexander-Walker would be a swingman like that. A Kyle Anderson's another one that, if we're looking at Minnesota, a Josh Green from like Dallas would be cool for them. Looking at Jeremy Grant. So I think it's going to be interesting, as they don't have tons of assets to work with, but they have things that they can work with. And I'm rather excited with what the prospects this team can do with what they're working with. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, they're going to turn it around in one offseason, as I'm someone who firmly believes that with this team that has Moody, who averaged 12.6 points and shot 39%, and starts, they were 28 and 18 when Moody was there. So if you're going to decide to keep him or not, you got to decide there. But if you're not going to keep him, he's somebody that you can use in a Chris Paul deal to maybe bring somebody in, or use to get someone better. But yeah, like I've said, I think looking at the market, you're not going to get the Tobias Harris. You could maybe get a Miles Bridges in there, where take a chance on him and see if he could be someone that could be impactful. I think Dennis Smith Jr. would be perfect for this team as a backup point guard. And I think besides that, as you look at the rest of the roster, I'm fairly confident that this is a team that maybe next year's the gap year that they need, and to reload and then strike when it's for sure. So I want to hear your guys' opinions in the comment section. What is your expectations this year for the Golden State Warriors? I think just the biggest thing when you look at this team is they need to rebuild the bench. And I think the starting lineup is there. Also, are we keeping Andrew Wiggins? That's the next one. I think you keep Wiggins, and I like the idea of down the road trading Wiggins when Kuminga's contract's going to kick in. But I think the idea of a Trace Jackson Davis, Draymond Green, Kuminga, probably either Klay Thompson or whoever you replace him with, Curry. And I think that's good. And the other thing is then you have Wiggins as the sixth man, or as we saw, Kuminga was kind of killing it as a sixth man too, but he was also great as a starter. But if it doesn't fit with him playing small forward, which we've known has been a struggle for him, have him be a sixth man, come in as for either the power forward or the small forward, and you keep Wiggins in the starting lineup. And I think that keeps your team's floor a lot higher. And I think Wiggins, closed out the season pretty decently. But let me hear your thoughts in the comments. That's it for me. Peace out.